Evening, everybody. I'm Harvey Smith. I'm with Berkeley Historical Society, and welcome everybody to our Zoom tonight. This is part of the exhibit that we have now at Berkeley Historical Society, Berkeley in the Movies. And our Zoom tonight is the Berkeley Repertory Cinema Scene with Gary Meyer and friends. Momentarily, I'll be introducing Gary, and Gary will introduce his friends, and we will also be opening with a brief video, Ed and Pauline. So I want to remind everybody that the exhibit is up until September 21st. The Historical Society History Center is open Thursday through Saturday from 1 to 4 p.m. So if you haven't seen it yet, please get on over there. And we also have another event coming up, and this is in collaboration with the Pacific Film Archive, and it will be on September 15th at the Pacific Film Archive, and it will be an event with Sheldon Renan, the founding director of the Pacific Film Archive. So we encourage everybody to sign up for newsletters or occasional updates from Berkeley Historical Society, or better yet, become a member. So membership is very nominal. So hope you can join us in future events. And let me open now with a little introduction of Gary. In his teens, Gary Meyer opened his first theater in the family barn to show his own productions. The Above the Ground Theater screened over 250 classic, foreign, and independent films, and hosted live productions, workshops, and published a literary arts satire zine, Nort, and the film newsletter, Cine. Following film school, he became a booker for UA Theaters, then co-founded Landmark Theaters, a national chain focused on creative programming and marketing strategies to build loyal audiences for non-Hollywood fare. After selling Landmark, Gary consulted on the Sundance Cinemas and the Brooklyn Academy of Music's Rose Cinemas, created film festivals for Dockers, the X Games, and others. He saved the 1926 Balboa Theater in San Francisco and joined the Telluride Film Festival in 1998, becoming a co-director. Meyer founded the online magazine EatDrinkFilms.com. Gary is the producer of the new documentary, The Art of Eating, the Life of M.F.K. Fisher, and is in pre-production on a new environmental film. And all of this is really just a sample of Gary's long involvement with film. So let's open up, and Gary, take it away.
I see there are people in the waiting room, so I don't know who lets them in.
Ann will do that, yeah.
Probably keep happening. Hi, everybody. What we're going to do first is we're going to watch a film by Christian Bruno called Ed and Pauline. Pauline Kael programmed and wrote the notes with her husband Ed Landberg at the Studio Guild on Telegraph, two funky little theaters. Yesterday I went to a memorial service for a man named Sam Chavez, who was a projectionist and highly regarded here. And it turns out he got his start projecting at that theater. So that was kind of, a predecessor to this. When I was asked to do something about the UC Theater, talk about the UC Theater, I said that it really couldn't be done without some of the people, some of the hundreds of people who have made the UC Theater what it is, what it was when it was at its peak. The theater had opened on June 30th, 1917. It was a first-run movie theater for many, many years. In its latter years doing that, it played The Towering Inferno and The Godfather, but then it was going to close. And actually, my partners and I wanted to have a theater, an old movie palace, where we could show a different double feature every day. And we were negotiating on the California Theater. And then suddenly the banker who was handling the negotiations said, "Oh, I decided to tell all the other theater owners in town that somebody's coming in and taking over the theater to go into competition with them. And there's a bidding war going on. We called the lawyer at Mann Theaters, who operated both the California and the UC, and said, is the UC theater still available? And he said, yes. Now, we were sorry because we love the balcony, the idea of a balcony and the beautiful Art Deco that's at that theater. But at the same time, the UC turns out to be better because it was all on one floor. And in the 70s, people tended to get a little bit stoned. And if they got in the front of that balcony, we were a little bit worried that they might fall over. So we kind of came out better time. And it's a theater that had a great personality. We got the keys 24 hours before, 40 hours before we were going to open it up. And we had it all booked, and we had a calendar programmed and distributed. And I got a telephone call from the union. We had signed up for the projectionists and the janitors to be working in the theater. And the business agent said, I have bad news for you. There's a kid who wants to organize the floor staff, the cashiers, the snack bar people, the ticket takers, who are going to work for you. And we have to go along with that. So we won't be projecting and we won't be cleaning up. We'll be picketing in front of the theater. And so on opening night, there were 50 pickets out in front, making a lot of noise. There were a lot of people who didn't come through the picket line, but amazingly, 600 of them did come through the picket line.
Wow.
See Day for Night and 8½. We figured we should have a film-related thing. And can you mute everybody except the 4 of us that are speaking?
I can try.
So through that crowd came a young guy, 15-year-old kid. And he said, I love what you're going to do. I love the movies. What can I do to help? I said, tear tickets. That was Chris Rasmussen. You see on the screen here over there. So Chris volunteered to tear tickets, and then we hired him on the floor staff. He became a box office cashier, the best. He got to know the names of the customers. He never was over or under in his cash count. He remembered if it was their birthday because on their birthdays they got in for free. And then he went and worked at the snack bar. And then he worked his way up the ladder to the projection booth. And he became the head tech for Landmark, the head tech engineer for Landmark. While he was doing all this, working at Landmark for 25 years, or not, 25 years at the UC, is that right?
At the UC.
He also was a professional wildlife, underwater, aerial, and portrait photographer and cinematographer.
I've never been bored.
Shortly after we opened, I got a phone call from Jan Klingelhofer. She worked at 20th Century Fox. And she said, I think you need my help. Can I come to lunch and convince you should hire me? And she was right, because this was an overwhelming thing to have a different double feature every day, 365 days a year. And so Jan came in and started working on programming with me. And as the company grew, she became vice president of film buying for Landmark, doing repertory and first run buying for the circuit. Both started with the UC Theater. She was a founding member of the Northern California Women in Film and Television, serving as president in 1984, and programmed several women's film festivals at the UC Theater. In 1985, she co-founded the first On Screen, which is this celebration I was just mentioning. And in 1992, she launched her own consulting service, Pacific Film Resources. She currently books films for numerous art cinemas across the United States, including the Rafael Film Center here, the Balboa, Vogue, and 4-Star in San Francisco, the Michigan and State Movie Palaces in Ann Arbor, and Michael Moore's 2 theaters in Traverse City, State, and Bijou. She served as an advisor and a jury member for a variety of film festivals and helped launch the Art House Convergence, serving on its board. Now, you can't run a movie theater if you don't have a manager who knows how to keep things going as smoothly as possible, keep the staff and the customers happy. And that's Maria Myers. She was one of our longtime managers at the theater. She actually started with our Ken Theater in San Diego and then came up kind of midlife at the UC Theater and managed it in a number of other theaters. She found creative ways to make this a home away from home of the audiences and her staff who were enthusiastic and really loved the theater. The staff became involved in promotions. The managers and staff got to choose some programs each calendar that were a double bill they wanted to try out. And it was up to them to be responsible for promoting it to make sure that it was a success. And Maria loved to do that. She made sure that there were people introducing films. After Landmark, she opened Cafina on Solano Avenue, but has now returned to San Diego, where she she's a realtor and is the 2024 president of the San Diego Women's Council of Realtors. So applause for all of those people. Okay. Do any of you have maybe an opening statement you'd like to make?
I'll start. I want to thank you, Gary, for inviting me tonight. It's such an honor to be here. You were such a icon to film in Berkeley and San Diego and Seattle. You really, I actually started at the Cove Theater when I was 16. Also, Chris, I was very young in my movie theater days, and Landmark was a big part of that. And because of you, I got to really embrace my love of cinema. So thank you for inviting me tonight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, because I just loved coming in. I could come into the UC Theater and not worry about anything. I could just go and enjoy a movie. Now, not always could you enjoy the movie perfectly. I'll tell a story. Chris can kind of talk about this. When we first opened, in the first couple of weeks, one of our policies was that we always insisted the distributors send us the prints a week in advance so that we could inspect them. We had a footage counter, and we could make sure that it wasn't missing anything, and that would give us enough time to get a replacement print if it was necessary. And I came in to see 5 Easy Pieces. Most of you probably have seen that movie. And there's a great scene in a diner, but the scene was missing. And I ran up in the projection booth and I said to the projectionist, "Where's the diner scene?" And he pointed to the garbage can and said, "It's there." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, I like the film to go through the projectors as smoothly as possible. And I didn't think it would do as smoothly if I put some repair tape on it. So I just tossed it." The next day I had to call the head of the union and say he's banned from our theater. It got banned from some other theaters, but he went on to do fine in other places. But it's one of the kind of nightmare stories that you kind of freak out when it happens. You're just not expecting it to happen. We were going to show this, and I hope we're going to show this film, Ed and Pauline, and Ann will let us know when she's ready. That was probably the first repertory theater that I ever went to when I was in high school. And it was on Telegraph. It was a little twin theater. And it was heaven, because I was not only seeing movies that I'd heard about, but movies that I discovered that I'd never heard about. And as I mentioned, Pauline Kael programmed it and wrote the notes for many, many years. Tom Luddy did some work of some notes with her on that theater, and then after she left. But there were a lot of other theaters in Berkeley doing repertory over the years. We had the North Side Theater, which was a single screen and then a twin. It was a pretty funky place. I remember when they showed a CinemaScope movie, you would see the parts of the picture would be on the side walls. Now I think that you pay a lot of extra money for a sidewall concept that some of the theaters do, but that wasn't what you wanted to do. Laval's Pizza was next door, and we could smell the pizza inside. Alan Michon, who spoke here recently as a part of this series, he opened a warehouse on Gilman as the Rialto Theater, and then he added a screen. He was living there. He added 2 more screens. We used to joke that you could hear 4 movies for the price of 1, and you'd probably get stoned if somebody was smoking in one of the next door theaters, because it might come wafting over. Tom Luddy was doing the F.W. Murnau Film Society on the Berkeley campus as one of several film societies that he did and other people did. Any night on Berkeley campus during the 60s and early 70s, you could see your choice of 10 films probably. And then Tom became involved with the Telegraph Repertory Theater further down. That by then the Studio Guild had closed and the cinema had been opened by the same people, Ed Landberg and his wife. But Tom took over, I think, as a laundromat, and built one and then a second theater with a partner. And when he left to become director of the Pacific Film Archive, the guy who was running it lost his lease, and he moved upstairs into an apartment, and he had 2 rooms in the apartment. I think a living room and a bedroom for the theaters that he was using up there. Alan Michon then opened the Sunset on the Telegraph, yeah, right by the campus, in an old pharmacy, and it was a beautiful little theater that he did. Alan, of course, now runs the Grand Lake Theater. and Pacific Film Archive was running films. I probably left something out. There was a thing called Film Calendar that a woman named Deborah Jacobs started. And when she started in the early 70s, there were, a handful of theaters in the Bay Area that were showing Repertory. I found this one from 1977, and the number of theaters showing Repertory was triple. It was quite a scene here, and we had an audience that loved those kind, what we were doing. They were adventurous.
After World War II, we despaired of movies as a mass medium. And when the new European films came in, particularly the films from Italy, and then films from Japan and other countries, we began to see the possibilities of movies as a different kind of medium.
Post-war was a turning point. Perhaps the nation had been holding its breath for so long, or that returning soldiers brought back something of the wider world with them. This was most significantly felt in the San Francisco Bay Area. Despite the stiffening of the Eisenhower era, art, literature, and thought flowed. It became the seedbed where the bohemians would bloom, and people were crazy about the movies. It could be heard everywhere, in the streets, in the cafes, and on the airwaves.
Behind the movie camera, Pauline Kael, Michael Greig, and Weldon Keys.
The format was they would go to some movie, and I think they would have dinner and drink some wine, and then they'd come into the studio in downtown Berkeley.
Tonight's the night when we ask why there weren't many good films made in Hollywood in 1954.
It was a very lively sort of down-home show.
One member of this bright new community would later command a place among America's leading film critics, Pauline Kael.
Let's start positively.
Oh, all right. Positively.
She would be, the leading spirit in the thing.
From Hollywood, the only picture that I think might be tolerable, On the Waterfront, I think is a tolerably fit movie for a list of good pictures, and Beat the Devil for laugh. Outside of that, the only pictures I saw of any quality would all be foreign.
Pauline had very distinctive chatty voice, as her criticism remained chatty, even though she became very famous and very influential. And I think the program helped to shape that mode for her.
Her writing was so vigorous, so smart and snappy.
Well, often her style was the fetching part of an article.
Yeah, many reviewers and even many serious critics have a sort of a detached way of going about their work. She wanted it to be personal.
And she had a couple of blocks, there are a couple of, she didn't like anything that smacked too heavily of highfalutin.
Art for
Arty,
a lot of foreign directors that she didn't like.
She greatly appreciated the energy and sometimes the smarts of traditional American popular cinema. The highbrow contingent, in which you would have to place most of the people who thought of themselves as film artists, didn't care for most of these movies. The thing about Pauline that people are always curious about is, who is this we that she claims to speak for? She says, we really liked that film and we really hated that film. She saw herself not as a solitary speaker, but as a kind of a mouthpiece for a spirit abroad in the land, a particularly Western spirit, moreover, because Pauline, who came from Petaluma and was the daughter of a Jewish chicken farmer, I gather, was not your New York intellectual writing for partisan review or anything like that. She had a very healthy disdain for the New York intellectual establishment, and she was hot to establish the fact that Westerners could be smart about culture just as much as anybody east of the Hudson.
Not far away in the sleepy college town of Berkeley, another eccentric was getting his start in this dawning age of cinephilia in America. It was a theater as eccentric as the man himself.
As I recall, it was a twin theaters called Studio Guild or Cinema Guild. And
Um.
Judy. Look.
The vocals went out.
There's the sound.
Yeah, I can't hear it either.
And they fitted them in odd storefronts. Well, it had a little tiny box office on the left as you walked in, and then there was one door to the left and one door to the right.
Ratty secondhand seats. You had to be careful when you sat down, or you might be stabbed by part of the springs or something. A sort of tasteful dinginess, I guess.
Ed Landberg was rather short. He was dressed rather kind of dapper, very much like the ladies. He had a kind of slightly egotistical, even arrogant bent to himself. The sense that he was on some kind of great cultural mission, but I kind of liked him.
It showed a vast variety of things. They were silent comedies. Sometimes they were indeed documentaries. Sometimes they were traditional Hollywood films. Sometimes they were European features.
Dropped audio again. Boy.
If this was it, I'm not sure that it was. It's hard to say. I thought I'd become a film exhibitor and that I'd never show a lousy film. So I opened my own art house theater. It didn't exist anywhere in the United States at the time. I wasn't showing films to make money. I thought that they would draw for artistic reasons. And since I had a real instinct for what was artistic, the audience found me. And that's how I was building the audience before I met Pauline Kael.
This is KPFA in Berkeley. Here is Pauline Kael with another in her series of programs called Movies.
Why are our movies so bad, others so good? I will not dispute the assumption. I think our movies are shockingly bad, although in the past year there were a few we didn't need to be ashamed of.
Pauline's reputation was growing. She took sole charge of the radio show where people tuned in each week for her singular insight.
She loved being divisive, and I don't think she was always right either or fair, but she didn't act like she didn't pretend to be fair. She was the first critic that said, well, too bad. This is, I'm starting a religion here. This isn't journalism. This is religious writing. This is dogma.
I would like to talk about the collapse of film criticism in this country, so that there are almost no intelligent guides, either for audiences or for filmmakers, and about why our young filmmakers make spitballs instead of movies.
The outlets for serious film writing were too few at that time. For a single mother like Pauline, stability could be elusive. She worked odd jobs, shifts at a bookstore and at a local dry cleaner, while trying to establish herself as a writer.
I had read an article by her in Sight and Sound, which is a British film magazine, and I was surprised to find that she was in Berkeley. By and large, it was more intelligent than any film criticism that I had heard. And so I thought I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I was looking for some kind of support since I was on my own doing this. I went to San Francisco and she agreed to meet me. She lived in Lion Street or something. And I met her and we had some conversations. I remember one time I was over there and by chance, it wasn't deliberate on my part, my hand grazed her breast. And she kind of looked up at me and said, "What you got to lose?"
When they got married, it surprised the hell out of everybody. And whether they ever had a sex life or anything was utterly unclear to me, at least.
You became more and more involved. She started to write program notes for the Cinema Guild.
I know people were very pleased when she and Landberg made a sort of partnership to work together on the theaters, because we knew that would make it livelier and more, sort of give a higher tone to the proceedings.
Did they not have a high tone at the?
Well, when you saw the previous write-ups, they were okay, but they were nothing that special.
I thought if I just gave the titles of the films that I showed, the word of mouth would get around. I didn't want to manipulate the audience.
They were little masterpieces of criticism, actually.
Dreyer turns the camera on the faces of Joan and the judges, and in giant close-ups, he reveals his interpretation of their emotions. In this enlargement, Joan and her persecutors are shockingly fleshly. No other film has subtly linked eroticism with religious persecution.
She had this incredible gift of writing about a film that she didn't really think was very good, and yet made you want to come and see it.
You won't count this film among your deathless experiences. Chances are, the day after, you won't even remember the name of the heroine. But you won't want your hour and a half back either.
They were such a big deal. I mean, we'd plan our weekends around going to Berkeley to see these movies.
Everybody in Berkeley had on their refrigerator or on their bulletin board in their dorm.
When you'd read those notes, you'd be enticed to see every single one of those movies.
All that she developed on the radio and in print, the chatty tone and personal POV, the we in her writing, was here. The Cinema Guild was the forum that energized Pauline's talents.
Joan Fontaine suffers and suffers, but so exquisitely in this romantic evocation of late 19th century Vienna that one doesn't know whether to clobber the poor wronged creature or to give in and weep.
When the calendars would come out of what they were going to be showing, we'd be out of our minds, because nearly every one of them would be some legendary film that we'd read about, and suddenly here they were going to be showing the Bogart films.
That ambiguous mixture of avarice and honor, sexuality and fear, Humphrey Bogart gave new dimension to the detective genre.
It's hard to imagine when those films were not all around us, but they were more legendary than anybody had actually got to see them. Citizen Kane is a perfect example. You couldn't see Citizen Kane anywhere.
Wells not only teases the film medium with a let's try everything once over lightly, he teases his subject matter once over heavily. Citizen Kane is more fun than any other great film we can think of.
It was stuff you'd never find anywhere. I'm not sure where they got all that stuff, especially then.
They would rediscover films that were totally ignored when they came out in the commercial cinema, like Charles Laughton's Night of the Hunter was a great film, but then it was a huge flop when it came out as a theatrical release. But Pauline Kael knew it was a wonderful film, and that film was constantly in their repertory.
In the notes which I wrote for The Night of the Hunter when I was still programming for the Berkeley Cinema Guild, I said that I thought it might turn out to be an American classic of the same sort as Germany's Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
I should be very deeply touched and very grateful if you are partly instrumental in making people see what I think is in that movie. And I'm very glad you are fighting and scrapping to draw people's attention.
His theater, her writing. It was a perfect match. Or was it? Did they love the movies too much but not one another?
I found myself basically out of a job because she was doing it all. Yeah, we had something in common, but what exactly it was, I can't remember.
It just didn't seem like a likely match.
It was hard on Ed being married to her, but it may have been harder than anybody to be married to either of them.
She started to copyright the notes under her own name. After less than a year, I asked for divorce.
She was fired by her husband, ex-husband, whatever. When he fired her, he changed the combination on the safe. Yeah. He's a strange guy.
She apparently thought that I would just collapse. But she did what she could to make me fail. She realized that she wasn't going to be able to beat me. And so she left for New York, tail between her legs, and got the job at the New Yorker that she got. So in a sense, I forced her to become famous.
The initial reviews are extremely negative. Pauline Kael wrote an enormous piece, about 5,000 words, on Bonnie and Clyde. She realized what was going on, that this was some kind of real shift was going on in public taste. So she was able to like surf in on that. I mean, she saw it, she saw the wave. She wrote it all the way to a staff job at the New Yorker, became the most influential film critic in America up until the time she retired.
Ed Landberg felt that that Pauline had wrongly gotten all the credit. He felt that he should have had more credit during her years, that he was also part of the team. He wanted to prove that Cinema Guild would be just as good as before, if not better. To his credit, he was perhaps the first exhibitor in this country to show Ozu in a truly crusading way. Ozu was not well known in this country. His films were not in distribution in this country. He really understood and loved Ozu and deserves a lot of credit for introducing many of us to Ozu.
The exhibitor, the critic, both shape the ways we see the movies and help articulate our feelings around them. And for a brief moment, like luminescent shadows flickering through the darkness, this unconventional cinema on Telegraph Avenue served as a testament to the power of those feelings.
They still have Paulettes. They still have all these critics that either are Paulettes or not Paulettes, which I'm shocked by, but people take that really seriously, and they do. There's still wars about that.
Jan, are you still there somewhere?
I am.
Okay, good. Tell us a little bit about what goes into programming and booking a theater. You started doing it with the UC Theater. and Landmark, and now you do it with theaters all over the country. And everybody has all kinds of demands. And take us a little bit through the changes in what is available to show.
So we all have these great ideas about, what to show at a movie theater. And it turns out that it's a complicated process, maybe a little less so now because of digital availability. And so you don't have the difficulty of these delicate film prints. Back when we started programming those double and triple bills at the UC Theater, changing daily, it was a job in itself to make arrangements for the print, book it as it were, convey the terms to those who would be paying, check on the actual shipment, and as Gary pointed out earlier, make sure that that what has been booked arrives at the theater in a condition to be shown. And I was not usually involved with whether the projectionist was going to clip material, important scenes. I do remember an anecdote about a Japanese television station that apparently decided that with a Fred Astaire movie that they would just cut out all the dance scenes because they were kind of, wasteful or something. So this process might involve, because there were limited film prints, it might involve very complex, what they would call circuits, which might mean some individual picking up the 2 film cans and either driving them to the next theater or putting them on a train or a bus or something like that. There were a lot of mechanics involved in showing these movies that weren't really visible to the audience, which I think they should all be grateful for. And now we're in an age where 35 millimeter and 70 millimeter are very rarely shown. There are only very few theaters in the United States that are capable of handling these precious film prints and without damaging them. And because of digital, the experience of seeing something can be just as pristine on many later views as it was the first time around. There are those who argue that the process of watching film versus digital is a very different experience. And I think that when we see a 35 millimeter film, we can understand the power of this medium. So as to the programming, it's a very different process now than when I was working with Gary, because my clients, those movie theaters that are around the country, have audiences that are different. And I rely on the people I work with in that community to have a sense of what is special to their audience, what will work. And fortunately, they are right more than they are wrong. And sometimes come up with these innovative programming ideas. And it's it's still great fun doing that. I have to say that Gary's approach always included not just the programming, but a sense of showmanship. Gary was always very astute about making going to a movie theater a very special experience. It wasn't like you were going out to sit with a bunch of people to watch a static thing, a TV show or anything. There was often something extra going on.
It was.
Bienvenido a mi gruta, Macario.
Where's that coming from?
Great film, Macario. How that happened. As was mentioned, I started at First Theater in my parents' barn, and I always introduced the films and talked about the films, and we did midnight classic horror films, and we did something in the dark every time. We'd play an old radio show or have a seance. We actually had a house bat that loved to fly through the projection beam whenever we were showing vampire movies. I don't know how that came to be, but it was in reality. And so it just seemed like it would be fun to do more than just show movies in the theaters. I mean, part of it was the staff. A lot of it was the staff and their ideas that they came up with. They often would come up with things that could be done in the theater for the show. If we get the slideshow going, there's a picture, but The House on Haunted Hill is a William Castle film. And when it first came out, as there's a scene where Vincent Price opens a door and a skeleton flies out. And in the original theaters, a skeleton would actually fly over the audience's head. And we wanted to try and see if we could duplicate that. And we did. I think Rick was the projectionist who figured it out with having a skeleton behind the curtain on two fishing lines with a fishing pole in the booth. And at the right moment, he would give a yank. The skeleton would come out from behind the screen, the curtain, and then he would reel it in. It would fly over the audience's head. We did that on a night when Charlie Haas, who's an Oakland-based screenwriter, wrote Gremlins 2 and a number of other films, and particularly he wrote a film called Matinee that was about all these kinds of gimmicks with movies. And so Charlie was there that night. And again, if we get to the slideshow, there's a couple of great photographs of the staff getting into the whole work of that. Sometimes there would be live music, particularly when we showed silent films, which we did a lot. Every calendar we had silent films. And on the anniversary of the theater, June 30th, we always had a birthday party where we tried to recreate a night at the movies in the silent era. Maria?
Yeah.
That's some of the things that you can remember doing.
Oh my God. I mean, there's so many. But you just reminded me of like, and Jan also, you know, when there was shipping problems, which inevitably every couple years, there would be some big shipping problem. We would beg you to raid your room. You had a room at the UC Theater and we'd just go, oh my God, our film didn't come in. Now what do we do? Well, what does Gary have? And we would, you know, we would raid your room and we would have, of course, with your blessing. Or, and we would also have trailer reels of all the things you collected over the years. We had a beautiful trailer room. What are some of the other things? Yeah, we would do as many special things like Monty Python, spam tosses. We would have skits. There's just so many. We would have music before films if there were, you know, Spanish music or gypsy music, or we would always try to do something special to make the experience even more special for the people that came, and for the staff would always play a huge part. It was so fun.
Uh-oh.
Audio, Gary?
Sorry about that. Christiane was talking about the variety of different kinds of film presentation, or it's not all film anymore. I was getting a kick out when film festivals used a reel of film as part of their design for their posters, but you've seen it all. You've seen it from when we had 2 projectors They did a changeover. There'd be a little dot in the screen, on the top of the screen, that a few people in the audience might recognize. And then that was to alert you that a changeover was coming. And then things kind of changed. And tell us a little bit about that and about some of the adventures that you had in that projection booth.
Well, when I started, yes, it was a changeover house. We had 2 projectors, and every 15 to 17 minutes, we'd change from one reel to the next. The movies would come on 5, 6, 7, 8 reels, sometimes 10 reels, and we'd be changing over as we went through. And as Gary, you said, there was a little circle in the upper right corner that would let us know that the first circle would tell us to start the motor on the second projector, and the second circle would show up 10 seconds later to tell us to switch over the sound and the picture. And among other things that happened, sometimes the film cans would have an odd reel from another film that you didn't expect, and it wasn't caught in the film inspection. That was an uncomfortable surprise. On my first night projecting, we would have a new double bill every night. And the projectionist protocol was to inspect the first film of the next day so that it was prepared for the projectionist coming in while we were running the first film. And we'd inspect and run the second film and then the first film for the next day. So as I was inspecting the second film, I turned and I saw a pile of film building up beside the projector, almost in front of the port glass, because one of the take-up bands had broken off. And the film was just piling up there, and I was a new projectionist, and I almost panicked. But I did manage to wind it up by hand, start the next reel, and I mentioned it to you, Maria, but yeah, nothing had, or no, I'm sorry, that was Kathy at the time. But the audience was none the wiser. Nobody knew that had happened. Yeah, too many booth stories to mention.
Ann, are we having any luck with the slideshow or not?
Yeah, I think it's ready to go. See it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Couldn't resist putting this in here. You know, if anybody complained about anything, they got a pass.
I always took those passes, even though they were really old. If anybody presented them, they were special.
Yeah.
In the old days, we used to barter with those. We bartered for pizza across the street at Round Table. They took passes for pizza. We bartered for hot tubs. I had a welding job done on a motorcycle frame for 7 passes to the UC. They were more valuable than money because we'd take them on any show.
Yeah, and we let you bring in your friends too as guests. We felt that if their friends came and enjoyed the show, they would tell other people what a great time they had.
And they did, and they would bring friends.
Next slide, please.
Oh, next, okay.
Next slide. Just to let everybody know, do not miss going to see this exhibit through September 21st. There's all very rare material. This is a view from the cashier booth that Chris had when he was
memorable.
Next one, please. Next. And this is a view in the booth that Chris might have had if he was projecting.
Yep.
This is after carbon arcs and xenon. Okay, we talked about some of the other repertory houses. Here are a couple of very old calendars from the North Side Theater that I mentioned. That was on the north side of Euclid. Next, please. This is Cinema Studio Guild, the one that Pauline Kael was involved with. Just a couple of different calendars on there, and this is the Telegraph Repertory that we talked about. This is when the UC Theater was first being built. The Williamsons built the theater. Harry Williamson, who was alive when we took over the theater, but he was in his 90s, I think. He was born on a ship coming from Portland to San Francisco. got here. They lived directly across the street, and that box office view, you would have seen their apartment up above. And when he was 5 years old, they were building the theater. And Harry told me that he came running across the street to see his dad, didn't pay attention, and a streetcar hit him, and he lost his leg. And when I knew him in the 90s, he had a wooden leg.
Oh my God.
Next, please. Oh, this is in 1917, the year the theater opened. You'll notice that the up on the top there, there's a little man with the flags on top of him, and you have a simple marquee with some lights on the top of it. Next, please. Harold Lloyd's a freshman. It's a period of time when they built these really beautiful facades in front of the theater. I didn't put them in, but we have ones with flags across University Avenue that say the freshmen at the UC Theater. Next, please. Then they put what we call a blade, a tall thing to get people's attention as they came up University Avenue. Next, please. This is what the lobby looked like. Plants in there. When we remodeled the theater after about 2 years, we tried to replicate. Jack Tilmany, who's this fantastic collector of theater photographs, had given us these photographs. Next, please, and you'll see another one.
Those lights were still there.
Yeah. Well, I think we found lights like that. We put wood molding in, and we tried plants, but they died. They got no sunlight whatsoever. Next, please. This is in the 40s. Next, please. That's that relief that's still up there on the top, and also that appears above the screen in the theater. Next, please. So we would put the films that we were playing, but the staff got to have fun with the front sometimes and put their own messages, sometimes like this, sometimes political, like the Grand Lake now does. Next, please. It was a brave thing to change the marquee. Any of you just pop in anytime you have something you want to say about any of this.
Bill Martin.
Oh, I did that for years. The Finnish director, Antero Ali, worked at the UC Theater. He was the first marqueesman for Landmark. And when he moved on, I took over. And my most memorable night was being up near the top of the ladder when a van load of college kids came by with fire extinguishers with water and soaked me to the skin on top of the ladder, and there was nothing I could do to get out of the way. Funny in retrospect.
Next slide, please. Maria has this in the background. I didn't know she was in this, but these were these beautiful seats. They're similar to the ones that are in the Paramount Theater still.
I have one.
Please.
I still have one. I love those. And we painted them when I worked there. We painted all the chairs again to gild them.
I want to mention, actually, when we decided to do some remodeling, it was a year and a half in, the theater originally had 2,200 seats on one floor. When we took it over, it had 1,600 seats. We didn't need that many seats, and there was no room for your legs if you were more than about 4 feet tall. So we decided we wanted to reseat, keep all of these beautiful standards, but to reseat the theater. And one of the things that we realized was that the handicap seating was at the back of the theater. It's always at the back of the theater. And so we went to the Center for Independent Living and asked them to come over and to help us to design the seating. And they told us things that most people don't think about. Somebody who has disabilities and maybe is in a wheelchair might also have sight and sound problems. And if they are stuck in the back of the theater, not only do they feel like they're ghettoized, but they have problem hearing and seeing. And so we put spaces for people handicapped. Don't go forward anymore, please. Stop. Go back. Go back.
I'm trying. Let's see.
And there were, companion seating. And interestingly, the Rocky Horror Picture Show has a main character who is in a wheelchair. That became kind of part of the fun of it. So we're looking at some UC Theater calendars. If we can go back, you should be able to just hit on the left side of the column and go back up.
Go on the right forward, isn't it?
Anyway, this gives you a sense. It's hard to read them, I realize, and there are a few that are online that can be found Prelinger Archives is going to digitize the entire history of the UC Theater's calendars, so it'll be available for people. This particular calendar, we had a festival of Brazilian films. One of the things that we did when home video came along, we realized that that was going to be very challenging for us, partially because we had problems getting better prints. The studio said, well, the film business is not what it used to be because of home video, so we're not going to spend money making new prints. And in fact, a friend of mine, a film restoration, Peter Conheim, he worked at Movie Image, I think it was called, and they were a video rental store. And he would come over every few days and, can I get a new stack of calendars to take over to the store because our customers just love them? And we thought, oh, this is great. They're movie buffs. And he finally admitted to me once, he said, oh, the reason we get them is they come, they take your calendar, they circle the movies they want to see and rent them from us. They hand us the calendar and say, we want to rent these. So we had to do a lot of our own work, but this is the second calendar. The first one is, can we go back 2 more, Ann? Okay, this is the very first calendar of the UC Theater, April Fool's Day. Jimmy Stewart.
Day it closed. Do you know that?
Huh?
Gary, that was the day it closed in 2001, was April Fool's. Also, open and closed.
Right. Next, please. Now, why is this upside down? There's a reason this is upside down. One of my partners, Kim, had this theory that if people were to put the calendar on the wall, like we wanted them to, or on the refrigerator or in the bathroom, they would lift it up to read the notes and the show times. But in fact, if they lifted it up, this would have it be it'd be upside down if you flipped it over, but this way it would actually have been the right side. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but by having it upside down in the back, we could flip it up on the wall and read it. Okay, next one, please. This is a second calendar. We're getting a little more adventurous. So I say a little more adventurous, some more like underground in the Antonio's film, Tokyo Story, doing some Ozu, because we were getting a sense that our audience was willing to take chances. Next, please. Always down the line, we made a physically larger calendar. We added color to it. Next, please. Oh, and that last one actually had, I think, our first Whodunit series, or Murder by the Bay. Next, please. Rocky Horror's, I think it must be the first anniversary or some anniversary anyway. Rocky Horror played at the UC Theater 22 years, I believe.
Yep.
Longest engagement of any movie in the world. Next, please. Science Fiction Week there on the 3rd week. Usually we did festivals that were vertical, but sometimes we decided to just have a whole week, drive people crazy. Next, please. I think that's a Fellini festival that was going on. I know it's really hard to read these. I didn't realize how small they would be on the screen, but anyway, next, please. Oh, you can go back for a second. You'll see here on the 3rd row, second thing, Jules Seuss. That was a Nazi film. And somebody had some prints of some of these Nazi films. And so we had a rabbi come and introduce the films and put them into context. Similarly, when we showed Gone with the Wind, Whoopi Goldberg, who then was with Blake Street Hawkeyes and getting to be known, she came and introduced Gone with the Wind at the theater because it was a film that she loved, but she knew was also very problematic. Next, please. We kept redesigning the calendar, and these were a couple of mock-ups that the art department did. We had an amazing art department of people who, some of them went on to make films. Next, please. Buñuel Festival, animation. We were big on animation. People loved animation. And we actually started putting together programs of new animation from around the world. And the Tournée of Animation, the Animation Celebration, the tournée was something that had been started by the International Animation Society, and the man who ran it went to set up an animation studio in India, and so he turned it over to us. And it was great fun watching hundreds of fantastic films, and many of those filmmakers in those programs went on, like Tim Burton, John Lasseter, the Beavis and Butthead people. We had the very first Simpsons that were part of a Tracy Ullman TV show. There's a long, long list of people who've gone on to be great filmmakers who started in these programs. Next, please. The Janus Festival was the great European classics, Janus films, and I think every year we did a Janus Festival, and we would mix some of the Bergman, Truffaut, Fellini films with lesser known films. Chaplin Festival, we did posters for some of these festivals, and Chaplin was one of those. Bob Vaughn would come and play the organ. I have to tell the story about Bob Vaughn. I don't know how old Bob was when he was doing this, probably in his 80s, I'm guessing. He lived in San Francisco in the Sunset District. He had a motorcycle. He'd say goodnight to his wife after they had dinner, get on the motorcycle, put on his leather jacket and his cap, leather cap, and ride over to the UC Theater in Berkeley. Pull up in front of the theater, get off, take off all of his leathers, put them into the sidecar, and in his tuxedo, walked in and introduced the film and played usually a double feature on the electric organ. I know Chris remembers.
Oh, yeah. I knew Bob from motorcycling outside of the theater. And
likely silent movie accompanist.
Yeah.
Next, please. That's the Brazilian festival. There's also a Herzog festival here. These calendars actually continued on the back side. There would be another series of programming, and then you would open, at this point, you would open them up, and in the inside, there would be all kinds of articles, some advertising from local businesses and restaurants. Next, please. I think I show a couple of insides here. At a certain point, as the repertory programming was getting more difficult because of the print issue and the home video, we started to do first runs, restorations of films, and play them for more than just a day. So in this case, there was the restored version of Blood Simple that was done by Walter Murch. Next, please. It's a bunch of different, interesting programs if one can read it. More animation, of course. Next, please. We did a French series. We went to the French government and said, we'd like to show French movies that have never been picked up for distribution in the US. And so a couple of us flew to Paris, got to fly to Paris and spend a week watching films in Claude Lelouch's incredible private screening room, and chose 10 films. And we toured them all over the landmark theaters. And these were films that had been turned down by distributors for whatever reason. Quite a few of them got reviewed, and as a result, half of these films got picked up by distributors after our festival. So we did this kind of a festival with Russian films, Czech films, Scandinavian films, Brazilian films, et cetera, and it was a great, wonderful success. And we would often work with an airline to get a free ticket for 2 people to go to someplace and a hotel tied in with it. Next, please. This is a festival that one of the years that Jan put together, the Bay Area Women's Film Festival. Next, please. There's a little bit of the programming. It was in several pages, but I just want to put a little bit in there. Next, please. So one day I opened the Village Voice and I see the UC Theater calendar, a full page ad in the Village Voice. Oh, wait a minute, no, it's not the UC Theater, it's the Sutton Theater. What is this? This is a theater run by a great, great distributor and exhibitor in New York called Don Rugoff, who I'd become friends with. And there's actually a very interesting film about him that was made by a distributor, Ira Deutschman, recently. But what he said was, I called him up and I said, Don, you stole our calendar. He said, well, no, I had a space between movies, first run movies. And I just said to my guys, hey, look at these UC Theater calendars. We love them. Just duplicate it, do the same thing. So I had to take it as a compliment. Next, please. This is the, I didn't get all in there. Well, the humor magazine at Berkeley, UC Berkeley.
Pelican, yeah.
Go back, please. They came out with a spoof called the Yuck, YUC Theater. I guess I didn't center this very well. But you get some of the spoofs that they did, the double features, and putting fake stars together, a streetcar named Brenda with the Tupperware Menagerie, the Big Sheep, and I'm Curious Flipper. And it was a very much fun thing. This will get digitized and put up online as well. We did a Sandy Duncan Film Festival they put together at Charles Bronson Festival.
The Charles Bronson.
Huh?
The Charles Bronson Film Festival featured I Kill Everybody on a double bill with I Kill Everybody and Poke Their Bodies with Sticks.
And I blow the shit out of everybody. Okay, next. We did special festivals. This was called Cyberfest, and again, I cut off the top, I'm sorry. But it was kind of the beginning of a lot of cyber internet stuff going on, and so we put together a program that reflected that, had speakers. Clubfoot Orchestra is a great local orchestra that accompanied Metropolis. They and the Alloy Orchestra came and performed. Alloy came from Boston, and they performed for us and actually toured around the country. Next, please. This is from the Russia series. Next, please. Another women's series. Next, please. Oh, Chris mentioned, or earlier somebody mentions, Maria mentioned spam, but so tell a little bit more about that spam story. And this is an article that we got the Chronicle to run.
I don't know, Chris, do you have a good?
Well, I'll do the lead in and then you can pick it up. When we ran this double bill of Monty Python and the Holy Grail and now for something completely different, the Rialto cinemas had been running it for a solid year, 7 days a week. And Gary picked it up again because we used to rent it about every year to popular acclaim. And Gary thought, well, why not? I'll give it another go, even though it's been at the Rialto. I was selling tickets that night, and we sold out 1,600 tickets to a film that was running just across town and had been every night for the last year. This one featured, as Maria will now tell you, the other way to use spam.
Well, we had many incarnations of the spam toss. We call it, I did it in San Diego at the Ken Theater, which was another repertory theater run by Landberg. That's where I started. And then I got the job in Berkeley later. But because Berkeley was doing a spam toss with a double feature and we were running a double feature, we're like, well, we got to do a spam toss. But what is a spam toss? And what, so there's many different ways to do a spam toss. You can throw it into the theater. Usually we did wrap it up in plastic because it would have fallen apart, and we would slice it, so it wasn't a big chunk coming at you. But if you caught it, you'd win some free passes. And then other times we would do a show in front of the stage where people would toss it, like we'd have partners, and whoever caught the most pieces or had the biggest chunk at the end would win the free passes. So there you go. Plus, we'd have a skit.
Next, please. Some more special. We did, these were at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. We would do Shakespeare in cinema, literary adaptations, films from the New Age, psychology films. This was actually an idea that we took with permission from the Laemmle theaters in Los Angeles. They had been doing it for many, many years. We did our own programming, but the idea that you wouldn't usually be open from 11 to 1, and you could do some very special kind of programming. And so we did these kinds of series. Next, please. Now there's a series of kind of festivals that we did. These kinds of festivals were the challenges, the ones that we said, we need to do these kinds of films, even though they may not make a lot of money, but that's okay because Rocky Horror and Jimi Hendrix and Clockwork Orange and King of Hearts and Harold and Maude, et cetera, will more than pay the bills. Next, please. The Margaret Mead Film Festival was an established festival on the East Coast, and we partnered with them to start showing every year a selection of films from that festival. We'd have local speakers from the Berkeley campus. Next, please. Paranjandov, we were able to get some prints of films that were never seen in this country. Partially thank you to Tom Luddy, because he'd gotten some of these prints for the Pacific Film Archives collection. Next, please. Oh, actually, go back for a second. I have to tell a Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors story. The Centos Theater was a repertory theater in San Francisco. Hans and Lila were the couple that owned the theater. And they booked the strangest double bill once of Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors which is a Georgian film, Russia, Georgian film, very surreal, with The War of the Buttons, a charming French comedy about kids. It didn't make any sense, but it struck a nerve and became a big success for them in San Francisco. But they said, we wish we could get more shows in each day. And this Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors is not really a straight storyline. If we drop one reel, we can get another show in every day, and nobody will ever know the difference. And they did. Next, please. Jan, I don't remember which festival you did a tribute to Cicely Tyson, but can you talk a little bit about that?
I was part of Women in Film, an organization that, well, it was Women in Film and Television. And we had a group of very active filmmakers in the group, and we got together. And one of these women was successful in reaching Cicely Tyson and persuading her to come and receive the honor of a tribute. And so she did. She came in and very gracefully accepted the award. And then she and her husband, Miles Davis, came to an after party, and it was quite the event.
And the thing was that Miles Davis said, I'm going to come in after the lights have gone down. I do not want to take away from my wife's spotlight. He quietly came in to watch the awards.
Yes.
There are a lot of famous people that came to the UC Theater before they were famous. Tom Hanks, in an interview in Film Comment when Philadelphia came out, said he got his film education at the UC Theater. The directors Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, who did Half Nelson, Sugar, and more recently the Captain Marvel film, they say they got their film education there. I'm always hearing about that. I'm always running to people who say that they live there practically. So if television is going to be competition to us, then we're going to put television on the big screen. And there was a book out that had come out called The Couch Potato Book, and the guy lived in the Bay Area, and I contacted him. And so we put together these couch potato shows. And it would be from noon to midnight, what classic television from the 50s and 60s might have been. My favorite grouping was the dating game, followed by the newlywed game, followed by Family Feud, and in divorce court.
Perfect.
Gary, it's nearly 8:30, so we want to allow some time for Q&A.
Let's do that.
So keep that in mind, please.
Real quickly, just go to, we had Creature Features, Bob Wilkins when he was still alive, John Stanley, next. Some of these animation programs we did, the posters we designed, next. John Waters came many times. Divine came a couple of times, and she was doing a play in San Francisco and kept calling me all day, the day of the appearance, and saying, I just don't know whether to come as a man or a woman. And I said, Divine, I can't tell you what to do. She contacted the seamstress for the play he was in, arrived as half man, half woman. He had a dress on one side and pants and shirt on the other side. It was fantastic. I tried to find the photos, I couldn't find it. But John's Scratch and Sniff was a movie that smelled. When you scratch the different circles, you smell different things that were in the movies. And John signed that for us. Next, please. Gimmicks were great. We were talking about the William Castle thing. Scream Bloody Murder was given to you when you went to see that film so that you could put it over your eyes if the movie was too scary. Of course, you'd already seen the scary part before you realized that. And then a guy who actually worked for us, who did the calendar distribution for all the UC calendars, he worked for this company, and he came up with this concept of a vomit bag for this movie if it got too disgusting for you. Next, please. Rocky Horror, a major part of the UC Theater. They published this booklet on the farewell show. Next page, please. This is a history of Rocky Horror at the UC Theater. Again, something we'll have digitized. Next page. And the city of Berkeley felt that it was worth giving a proclamation. Next, please.
Whoopi Goldberg brought Rutger Hauer to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show. He had never seen it, and the cast had him sign all of their breasts. And he and Whoopi each donated $20, which was something at the time, to the cast, and they were very impressed with their show.
This is an article the Express ran, and I put on 3D glasses. It's a gimmick that I like. We did some 3D films. Next, please. Every Thursday night for many, many years, we showed Hong Kong films. I was able to get a few of them initially, and they did very, very well. People loved them. And Chris, you and Dee would go to see them in San Francisco, right? In Chinatown?
At least 1 or 2 nights a week. And you were running already Chinese Ghost Story, Peking Opera Blues. And we saw these movies by Jackie Chan, Ringo Lam, John Woo, and we were just delighted that you ran the festival for a whole calendar, and it did wind up running for 10 years. So I think it was successful.
Well, initially, I could just get a handful of these films, and I called the Chinatown theaters, and they said, well, we can't tell you where we get them. And I found out that Pacific Theaters, which is a chain out of LA, had theaters in Hawaii where they showed Chinese films. They were Chinatown theaters. So I contacted the guy who booked it, and he made arrangements for us to get this flow of these films so that we could do them every week. And it was so successful that Tai Sing got the rights to the films, and they got many, many films, made new prints, and asked us to program a touring festival and write all the notes. So Perry Glorioso in our LA office wrote all these incredible notes, and we did a touring festival in our theaters as well as in other people's theaters. Next,
that's
please.
fantastic.
So back to a little Rocky Horror. Next, please. Some cast shots. Is that Randy?
That is Randy on the right, former manager at the UC.
Next, please. This is, which group is this? This is Indecent Exposure, right? I think.
One of them, yeah.
Barely legal. Next, please. Performing in front of the screen for any of you who never had this experience. My daughter at her bat mitzvah said, I don't want to have a party. I want to bring all my friends to Rocky Horror Picture Show. 13. Next, please. Next. Becky Melanio, she was, I would say, the driving force.
Yeah.
Kept everybody together and happy. She was incredible. She's still incredible. She still does stuff. Next, please. Next, please.
Nope. At the end? Nope.
Oh, yeah. If anybody wants to do a little dance, now get up and do it. Same thing, you stretch. Next, please. So this, I was telling you about Charlie Haas, who's in the middle there. The staff got into it. As you can see, they decided to be monsters at this monster show, a spoof about monster movies. One of the staff members is being carried away by the werewolf. Next, please. Anybody know who this is?
Is that Chris?
Where did you find that?
And you can see there's a werewolf's hands pulling him into the closet.
Oh my goodness.
Next, please.
I survived.
There he is. What was his name?
Yes.
What was the skeleton's name? I forget. Mago?
I can't remember. Did you guys know?
Emergo.
Oh yeah, Emergo. That was the name of the
and it was Ren Long was actually the guy who set that up with Rick.
Next, please. There's Next, please.
What a treasure.
One of our great events was Tom Luddy calling me up and saying, you're doing a program of short Herzog films coming up. And Errol Morris, who's a student, was challenged, but he told Werner one night after a film at PFA, oh, you have to make a movie about this pet graveyard in Palo Alto or somewhere on the peninsula. The land's been sold, and the guy who owns the pet graveyard has to remove all the bodies and doesn't know what to do with it. And Werner, you've got to make a movie about this whole thing. And Werner said, I've got more movies than I know what to do with. You make the movie, and if you make this movie, I will eat my shoe at the premiere. How can I do that? I don't have a camera. I don't have film. He says, steal a camera, borrow a camera, steal the film. I don't care. And never figuring that it would happen. But next page, please. That's in the box office on the night it happened. And those are the hands. of Mr. Herzog cutting his boots. Next,
They
please.
kept it at Chez Panisse until it stunk too much.
Alice,
They said
Alice,
they had to take it away.
Alice Waters herself prepared the shoe and did it for the first 3 hours. The last 4 hours I supervised in the lobby of the theater, basting it and testing it until the end of the show, the movie show, at which point I announced it was ready and brought it down.
Got his face. He did it though.
She stuffed it with onions and garlic and things like that. Garlic on the left. Les Blank made a film of this, which you can watch online, called Werner Herzog Eats His Shoe. It's great. That's just an example of when there's a crowd there and somebody, I don't remember who that filmmaker that was, but they were there doing Q&As, which we're about ready to let you guys do. Next, please. Is there any more? That would be it. That seems to be it, Ann?
Seems to be.
Okay, well, I think we've actually run out of time, so there really isn't, I think, time for Q&A at this point, but
until 9 o'clock.
We said it would go till 9, Harvey.
oh, we did. Oh, okay. Well, let's try. So for Q&A, write in the chat, and we will share your questions. I do want to. There was a comment. I can start with that. This is by George, if I got this right, Ciceri. His comment is, it was a highlight of my 16mm life to have 4 or 5 of my documentaries showing at the UC on one night. Thank you, 30 years later.
And one of the calendars I thought I'd taken a photograph of, but I must have missed out, was an East Bay. There's Harvey. Okay. But you can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We showed a lot of local filmmakers' films, particularly documentaries, and would regularly do an East Bay Filmmakers Festival with all the filmmakers there. 4 of those filmmakers did a panel with you recently. And it was just fantastic to be able to have that be a part of our lives. We mentioned Les Blank and the Herzog Eats His Shoe. Maria, do you want to talk about what Les would do?
We left Les Blank, Flower Films, his little office in El Cerrito. He would always be on the calendar, and he's such a sweetheart. He was a little curmudgeonly sometimes, but he always showed up. He would always, like, if we asked him to bring something special, I think Chris, you said that or Gary, one of you said he brought garlic is as good as 10 mothers. He brought a whole bunch of toasters to make garlic bread for people.
Garlic. He would heat up. Oh,
toasting the garlic.
Toasting the garlic, and then when it got really smelly, he'd walk up and down the aisles during the movie, and wafting it with a fan so that people could do it. He cooked red beans and rice.
Yeah, he cooked for the Bon Ton Roulé was a documentary that we played, and he brought red beans and rice. And I mean, he was super genuine and just always there. He just, what a love. And his cohort too, Maureen Gosling, she also was wonderful. And they often would come together and spend a lot of time just with the crowd. They're just normal people, just like us, and it was such a treat to have people like that in Berkeley. And we had a lot of those kind of people that would, like, writers. Gary, you were hooked into all those people,
I was very lucky because my office was Jan and I were in the Fantasy Building. And we had a great office. We had the other bookers in there, Amy McCubbin, Susan Peterson, Rolanda Chu. And we were in the Fantasy Building where all these filmmakers were. And Saul Zaentz was there. And Saul came to the theater and presented films. We had a lot of interesting people that came to the theater. Alice Waters cooked stuff for us when we did the Pagnol trilogy. John Waters, as I said, Russ Meyer came, David Lynch.
You have to have Chris tell his story about Star Wars.
Oh yeah, Chris, tell that story about the little.
Didn't want to bury the. One night It was a Wednesday night. I think we were showing some artsy film like Night of Counting the Moons or something. And I was in the lobby, and a man who looked exactly like Terry the Toad from American Graffiti came in, and he had a small reel of film, a trailer, and he said, I wondered if you could put this trailer on. This is a movie I'm working on, and I wonder if you could just run the trailer. I want to see if the audience, what the reaction is. And as we were very filmmaker friendly, I said, yeah, sure. I took it up to Rick, our projectionist, and he put it on. It was the last trailer on the reel of the next show. And I went down at showtime, and I asked him, I said, do you want to come in and watch? And he was a little timid. He said, no. I'll just stand out here and I'll look through the porthole on the door. And I said, okay. And I stood inside and I watched. And there were, I think, 3 trailers before it, and the audience was dead silent, the way they are at most theaters on most screenings. And then this trailer came on, and the audience went absolutely crazy. They were cheering and whistling and clapping. And I looked back through the porthole, and George Lucas had this delighted smile on his face. And the movie was Star Wars, and it would be at least half a year before it came out.
And when the trilogy had all come out, we kept trying to get 20th Century Fox to let us play the trilogy as a program, and they absolutely refused. Yeah. And I knew somebody at Lucasfilm who was pretty high up, and I kept pushing him. And with Chris telling the story, I realized that probably had a lot to do with that experience, that they agreed to let us do the marathon of all 3 of the films. And then for fun, we showed George Lucas's favorite cartoon, Duck Dodgers in the 21st century, Hardware Wars, Ernie Facilius' wonderful spoof on Star Wars, and a serial chapter from Buck Rogers, and I think a chapter from Flash Gordon. Ann, can you do that other film?
I can try.
Okay. We did some trailer shows. One of them was called Beyond the Valley of the Revenge of the Son of the Bride of Coming Soon. 15 hours of coming attractions. Started with the long trailer with Lucille Ball, which I just couldn't resist starting with.
That was one of the follow-ups to Coming Soon and Son of Coming Soon.
Okay, hopefully get sent.
Oh, right. Hello, I'm John Waters, and I'm supposed to announce there is no smoking in this theater, which I think is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard of in my life. How can anyone sit through a length of a film, especially a European film, and not have a cigarette? But don't you wish you had one right now? And I'm telling you that smoke anyway. It gives ushers jobs. And if people didn't smoke, there would be no employment for the youth of today. So once again, no smoking in this theater.
So on the 10th anniversary of Pink Flamingos at the New Art Theater in Los Angeles, and it was playing in the UC and other theaters, we asked John if we asked him if he'd do it. And Doug and Steve Martin, identical twins who ran our art department, were filming the thank you thing he was going to do. And they had some film left over, and they said, can we get you to do something like a no smoking trailer? And he said, but I smoke. They said, perfect. And so he did that spontaneously. A few years later, we asked him if he'd do a sequel, and he said, I quit smoking.
We ran that before every single film that we played at the UC.
And on the first anniversary of Rocky Horror Picture Show, Maria, you weren't there yet, but Chris was. The fire department had come to a couple of Rocky Horror shows, which would pack the theater. And they said, on this anniversary, you're going to sell out, and you better not let people sit on the aisles. And we know that people light matches and lighters, and you cannot allow that anymore. And so we did a trailer that said, by order of the fire department of Berkeley, no matches, no fire, no lighters, and no fire-breathing dragons. And the audience would say that in unison every week after that.
They would also parallel John Waters on that trailer as I did watching it again. We all knew it by heart, which leads to another quick anecdote, that one of the most heartwarming moments at the UC Theater that really showed what it was like to go there, what it was like to be there at the time. During the last 5 minutes of a reel of a Bogart film, and I can't remember which one it was, the sound went out. Rick was running it, and it was the last 5 minutes of the reel. And when the sound went out, there were about 200, 250 people in the audience. And we all just kept the dialogue going because everyone knew the movie. And we all kept the dialogue going for 5 minutes until the next reel came on and the sound came back. And everyone in there applauded for a solid minute at themselves for knowing the movie and just for that experience.
For the love of cinema.
Yeah, for the love of cinema.
Jan, are you thinking of anything to add to this? Or think about it and come back when you do. I see that we don't really have questions. We have wonderful comments by people. There was one question about when Pauline Kael stopped working with the Studio Guild, and I don't remember the date. It would be, you'd find it on Wikipedia probably. You know, we were double and triple bills, and it was really fun to be creative with those things and try to come up with some sort of a connection. And I had seen a couple of actual double bills in other theaters that were kind of hard to believe, like Dr. Strangelove playing with Dr. Goldfoot in the Bikini Machine with Vincent Price and Frankie Avalon in Fairfield. I have an ad for that. Or Watership Down with Harold and Maude. And the only thing I figure is that the beginning, Hare is a rabbit in Harold and Maude. But it really was just because Harold and Maude always brought people in, and Watership Down was kind of coming to the end of its run. I always remember a twin theater that was showing Bambi on one side and The Deer Hunter on the other. That's the marquee. My truly favorite is it's only a San Francisco double feature at the Embassy Theater. And I have an ad for this as well. I'm not showing it to you, but it was Shaft's big score with, only in San Francisco, The African Queen. So this inspired us to start a outrageous double bill contest because it would just be a lot of fun. And we had a request book with people put all kinds of crazy things in. I don't know why they didn't realize that when they put the same film title in over and over again with the same handwriting, that we kind of figured out they were the same person. But anyway, just a couple of the thousands of entries that we got, and I have them all. I kept all of them. Young Tom Edison and You Light Up My Life. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and A Farewell to Arms. Don't Look Now, and Your Past is Showing. A Little Hand for a Big Lady and The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. So that's just I can give more later if we want.
What about on the more serious side? Are there double bills that you felt were really great beyond the spoofs?
Yeah, hundreds of them. And there were ones that I don't remember the failures because you repress them. We had like 6 giant Rolodexes, and every double feature that we played in any one of our repertory theaters, we entered it by hand what the double feature was, and so there was a cross. If it was Watership Down and Harold Maude, we'd have it entered both times. It would tell what theater played in, the day of the week, and the box office results. And then we were the first company in the film business to have computers. One of our partners, Burt Manzari, was a whiz, and he put together an incredible system that allowed us to keep all that information in there, and box offices and payroll reports. And instead of having to fax the program back and forth between Los Angeles and here for me to proof it, we were able to do it all on computer. So it was a really fantastic thing. The original partners, I just want to mention, were Steve Galula and Kim Jorgensen. And then we got together with Burt Manzari and Paul Richardson, who had a company called Movies Inc. in the Southwest that were doing the same kind of thing. We decided that collaboratively we could have more power to get prints made, because we did get prints made, and we got restorations of films like Streetcar Named Desire, Blade Runner, The Wild Bunch, things like that would have never been shown complete in this country, Brazil, stuff like that. I don't know if Chris and Maria want to talk a little bit about, well, Chris mainly, about upstairs above the UC Theater.
What about it?
There was a hotel up there, the UC Hotel.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It was a Park Hotel upstairs, yeah. And there were a lot of druggies and a lot of drunks that lived in that hotel. And so the street scene was not pleasant at all. We had a policy that if the police on the beat came into the theater, they got free coffee and popcorn. Because if we had a problem, we knew if we called them, they would respond immediately.
Always.
One night we were in the lobby, and all of a sudden it starts pouring rain in the lobby because evidently somebody turned on the bathtub and left it running.
Left it on.
And Chris, you were telling me about how the attempt to try to clean that smell out.
Oh my! Well, our 70-year-old rug had completely soaked, and I think it was the fire department that came and set up fans, and we had all the front doors open and the fans were blowing out. But yeah, it took quite a few days for that to dry out. It was it was soggy.
I do remember one of my favorite other water events. Shortly after we opened the theater, so I think it was May, there was a rainstorm, and really an unseasonal rainstorm. So people, of course, came with their umbrellas because we were showing Singing in the Rain. And they fought to sit under the leaks in various parts of the theater with their umbrellas open. Before the Sound of Music sing-along, there was a guy named George Moffat who was at the Berkeley Broadway Singers, and he came to us and said, how about doing a sing-along for Wizard of Oz and Meet Me in St. Louis? And they created slides for all the lyrics of the songs that were on either side of the screen, and we had the whole audience singing along with those songs, and we did more of them. And then later came the Sound of Music, but we had nothing to do with that.
There was a question about what was your favorite double bill, all of us.
Right, all
Maria, Chris, and Gary.
Well, I'll start. I tend to be kind of movie focused, and so without question, my favorite double bill is Joel McCrea and Preston Sturges' Sullivan's Travels, which is about a film director who makes comedies, and Buster Keaton's Sublime Sherlock Jr., where he, as a projectionist, he goes down and jumps into the movie and becomes a part of the movie. And it's the most brilliant editing you've ever seen, where he goes to sit on a bench and it cuts to another scene, there's no bench, and he just flawlessly continues to sit but winds up on the ground. It's only 45 minutes. You can watch it online, but it's much better to watch with an audience. It's really great. And it would be played with Duck Amuck, which is a Daffy Duck cartoon where the cartoonist is making hell for Daffy Duck on the drawing board, and when it pulls away, it's Bugs Bunny is the cartoonist. And I'd probably show a couple of comedy attractions with it as well. Okay. Maria?
Okay. Well, my favorite, most memorable double bill that we had was on Valentine's Day, and it was Fargo with Blood Simple. Loved it.
Great.
And it was so popular. I couldn't believe it. We had lines, and it was just so fun. It was a fun night because people were just in a humorous mood to watch on Valentine's.
Yes.
And rarely one to be at a loss for words. One that was the most personal to me, I don't know if you did this on purpose, but it was on my birthday that we had Forbidden Planet with the Wizard of Oz. And no two movies could be more perfect for my birthday. And I remember it particularly because it was the first time I had seen Wizard of Oz on the big screen. And I'd seen it every year for my whole young life. And it had never really, really touched me until I saw it on the big screen. And as Dorothy is hugging the scarecrow and her voice cracks when she says, "I think I'll miss you most of all," I and a few hundred other people in the theater went, "Ugh!" and the tears just started flowing. And unfortunately, the movie ends like in like 30 seconds, and the lights came up after the credits, and everybody was wiping tears and blowing noses. And in the line to the drinking fountain, we were all talking about it. It's like we'd only seen this on TV. It had never impacted us until we had this bigger presentation. So size does matter.
That's great. And in retrospect, I'm sure I did it because it was your birthday.
Oh, I suspected as much. And thank you once again.
Jen?
Well, you know, it's interesting that we're talking about double bills because double bills are so rare right now. So I go back to when I was younger and actually would go out for a double bill. And I just loved Fred and Ginger together. So Shall We Dance and Swing Time, just it would transport me into another world.
Yeah, and Jan loved Fred and Ginger. You talk about it because Janet used to be a dancer also, and she would program those, and they always did really, really well. And it was great to see those on the big screen because most of us had only seen them on television or 16 millimeter in a classroom or something like that. If anybody else has a double feature they want to put into the chat, that would be really great. I was thinking about the Midnights, you know, in addition to Rocky Horror, we Pink Flamingos, Eraserhead. We launched Eraserhead.
Yep. The Road Warrior?
Huh?
Road Warrior?
Road Warrior. Stop Making Sense.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yay.
Its Vogue premiere was at the
Such a good movie.
at the Castro Theater, and the entire audience was on the seats, the chairs, dancing. And it was the first time anybody had ever seen the film. And we decided to do a midnight dance concert every weekend, and we did it for quite a long time. And the distributor, I should have taken a picture of this. The distributor made up ads, little ads that were in the newspaper every week that were different, either in a different language or in sign language, or they were a different way of saying "Stop Making Sense." It's really quite wonderful. And then, you know, we would do a series of horror films. We did some all-night horror and science fiction.
Oh, God.
That were great, and we always had a couple of sneak previews, surprises that we'd get a filmmaker to let us play before it went out in theatrical release.
And the Russ Meyer-thon, all night Russ Meyer movies.
Yeah, Russ was great. Russ went to Kael, and he had all his Berkeley friends be there in the audience, and he would talk about his adventures. And I won't go into them; some of them are kind of X-rated, but he was a real character. Sometimes very difficult to work with. If I learned that he would be in a bad mood or a good mood when I would call him. So his assistant said, "You call me first, and I'll tell you whether it's a good day to talk to Russ or not." But even if it was a good day, he would, you know, he might say, "You owe me dinner at the Brown Derby." Okay, I wouldn't say that. No, I never had to have that conversation, but we would definitely go ahead. We do it. We convinced Disney to let us play Fantasia. They only would release their animated films every 7 years, and they had decided not to release Fantasia. The last time they'd done it had been in Dolby. We didn't like the Dolby sound, and a projectionist at Pacific Film Archive had a 35 millimeter magnetic sound print, and we had magnetic sound sound heads, and it was amazing. And we sold out, I think, practically every show. And as a result, Disney couldn't believe it, and they said, "Oh, maybe we should do something with this." They put it in the Castro for a week, where it set a house record, something like $75,000 way back then. That was amazing. Star Trek marathon with bloopers and Star Trek TV shows. It was kind of fun to do. So I think we're getting close.
Yeah, I think we're at our time limit, and so I just want to thank Gary, Jan, Chris, and Maria so much. That you all really, I think, showed your love of film and love of theater venues, you know, and you showed the kind of creativity that can go into showing films. So I think it's been a really amazing evening. Unfortunately, not only are double bills rare, but the theaters to show them in in Berkeley are now rare. So I just want to do a little shout out for the Save the UA Berkeley. And that's a website, savetheuaberkeley.org, because right now it's being discussed in the city of Berkeley, what may happen with the UC, and can it actually be reviewed by the citizens of Berkeley, or is it just going to go straight to development? Also, the Berkeley Historical website is BERK, berkhistory.org. So you can find more about the exhibit and more about our upcoming program. So again, thanks everybody.
I can, Harvey. The two theaters that exist in Berkeley are the Pacific Film Archive at the Berkeley Art Museum, which has incredible programming, a great summer series that's going on, several different series, and the Elmwood. That's our only surviving commercial theater. And you must support these theaters. Don't go out to Emeryville or to the Centuries in Richmond or something like that if the film is playing at the Elmwood. It's local people who run that theater with passion, and as the Pacific Film Archive is, and I just urge people to go to those theaters when you want to go out to the movies.
Well, I see Alan Michon is on the Zoom tonight, so yeah, occasionally you can get out there to the Grand Lake, I think.
Talking about, I was talking
That
about
works. Okay.
Yeah, may I add a word about the UA Berkeley?
Sure, please, Alan.
Yeah, the developers are trying to tell everybody that the interior of that Art Deco movie palace was demolished, was destroyed by the multiplexing that United Artists did in the 70s and later on. It's all still there. The additions can be removed. The theater can be restored. It is a spectacular Art Deco movie palace, and the more people that call the Berkeley elected officials about this, and the zoning people and the planning people, the better. We've been trying to get this theater saved. It's worth saving. It's very historic. It would be a spectacular community theater for live presentations with full stage, movie classics, whatever. It should be saved. And anyone who can throw a few words at this, we'd really love to have that support.
So, and I didn't realize Alan was on, but I was trying to talk about Berkeley theaters. The Grand Lake is my neighborhood theater. I can walk to it. We go to it all the time. Alan does an amazing job there, and that is what could be done in Berkeley. You can take a movie palace, have respect for the palace, have your multiple screens, and show movies the way they are supposed to be shown. His projectionists are the best in the business, well, except for Chris.
I think that's a good note to close on. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting it.
Thank you so much.
Night.
Good night.